There is a certain kind of political maneuvering that feels almost exactly like watching a high wire act without a net.
Oh, absolutely.
Like
Oh,
you are watching the acrobat up there, and part of you is just marveling at the sheer audacious skill of the routine,
you,
right?
you can't look away.
Exactly. While another part of you is just, white knuckling your seat, just waiting for the wind to change.
Just waiting for the drop.
Right. Well, welcome back to the deep dive. Today we are looking at a stack of incredibly concentrated sources, chief among them excerpts from a really fascinating document titled The Sovereignty Struggle, Smith and the Separatist Question.
It is quite the read.
It really is. So, our mission today is to take a magnifying glass to the highly complex, undeniably controversial separatist political strategy of Alberta Premier Danielle Smith.
And honestly, it really is a masterclass in watching someone try to, defy political gravity. I mean, the stakes could be much higher when you start fundamentally questioning the actual borders of a country.
No, they really couldn't. Now, before we really get into the weeds of this, I think it's important to frame how we're going to approach the material today for you, the listener.
Yeah, good call.
Because if you're reading the headlines right now, you know this strategy touches basically every single political third rail in Canada.
Oh, yeah, every single one.
It involves really intense left-wing and right-wing viewpoints. And, emotions are running incredibly hot right now.
Understandably so.
Right, understandably. So, because of that, we are going to act purely as neutral mechanics today. We aren't here to take sides. We aren't endorsing any specific viewpoints from the sources. And we definitely aren't passing judgment on whether these actions are, inherently right or wrong.
Yeah, we're just looking at the engine.
Exactly. Our goal is just to pop the hood on this political engine, look at the strategy, and understand how the machinery actually works, based entirely on what our sources are laying out.
Which honestly is really the only way to genuinely understand the mechanics of government. When you strip away the partisan temperature of the room, you can actually see how the gears are turning, like why certain levers are being pulled, and, crucially, what happens when those levers get jammed.
Okay, let's unpack this. Because the core of this source document, it revolves around one incredibly bold structural move, which is the October 19 referendum.
Yes, the ballot question.
Right. And the ballot asks Albertans a very specific, very loaded question. It's asking voters whether the province should start the official process for a future, binding referendum on separation from Canada.
It is quite the question to just, drop onto a ballot.
Seriously.
You are essentially asking the electorate if they want to take the very first legally recognized step toward fracturing the nation.
Exactly. But here is where we hit this massive paradox in the source material, which I really want to dig into.
Okay, let's do it.
So according to the documents, Premier Smith states that her personal policy, and actually the official policy of her governing party, the United Conservative Party, or UCP, is actually for Alberta to remain in Canada.
Right, yes. Officially, in this specific context, she is maintaining the posture of a unionist.
A unionist, okay.
Yeah, she is saying the goal is to keep the country together.
And yet she claims that this referendum, the one explicitly asking about the process to leave, is actually a platform to prove to Albertans that Canada can work for the province.
That's quite the rhetorical pivot.
It really is. I have to be completely honest with you. I was reading this over and over, and I really struggled with the underlying logic here.
Oh, I'm sure you did. It's a head scratcher.
Right. Like, is this like packing all your bags, dragging them to the front door, and, calling a cab?
Just to prove to your roommates that you actually want to stay.
Yeah, exactly. Just to prove you want to make the lease work. I mean, how does explicitly threatening to start the process of leaving actually prove that the relationship is functional?
Well, what's fascinating here is, it's a great analogy, but you have to look who she is actually talking to in the House.
Okay. Who is she talking to?
What the sources reveal is a highly intricate, dual-facing political strategy.
Dual-facing.
Yeah. This is a leader trying to thread an impossibly tiny needle to keep two very different groups happy.
Right, because she has a very specific base.
Exactly. On one side, you have this highly mobilized political base that feels historically alienated. Portions of that base genuinely ideologically want separation.
They actually want out.
Yes. Or, at the very least, they demand that their provincial government wield the ultimate existential threat of separation as a club.
A club to get what they want.
Right, to get better economic and jurisdictional terms from the federal government in Ottawa.
So they are the ones demanding that the bags be packed and sitting by the door.
Yeah.
They want the visual threat.
They want the federal government to sweat, basically.
Yeah.
But on the other side of that needle, you have the broader general electorate.
The people who aren't necessarily looking to blow up the country.
Right. And the reality of governing is that a mainstream unionist policy is generally required just to maintain economic stability.
Because I assume markets don't like secession talk.
Oh, they hate it. You can't just casually dismantle a G7 nation without triggering massive, catastrophic economic and social fallout.
Right. Markets panic. Investment dries up.
Currency fluctuates.
Mm-mm.
Exactly. So the strategy outlined here is to give the alienated base the structural mechanism of their frustration, which is the referendum, while officially maintaining the outward posture of a leader who is just aggressively negotiating to save the union.
It sounds like she's trying to harness the raw, kinetic energy of the separatist movement to power her negotiations without, actually letting that water break the dam.
That's a really good way to put it.
But see, if her goal is simply to send a message to Ottawa about making Canada work, the actual legal mechanics of how that message is sent are incredibly important.
Entirely. Mechanics are everything.
Right, because you can't just look at this October 19 referendum in a vacuum as a messaging exercise. You have to look at how the rules of the game were fundamentally changed to even allow this scenario to unfold in the first place.
Yes, the groundwork.
And that brings us to the actual legislative plumbing, which the sources spend a lot of time on.
Right, you have to look at the architecture behind the ballot itself.
Exactly. So our sources highlight a specific piece of legislation called Bill 54.
Bill 54, yeah.
And critics in the documents are arguing that Smith has actively made it mechanically easier to bring about secession by severely reducing the petition signature requirements.
She lowered the bar.
She lowered the bar. So the government has officially lowered the threshold for everyday citizens to actually trigger this kind of separation process.
Yes, they have.
And this is where my pushback comes in. Again, going back to the paradox. If the UCP's stated goal is absolutely, officially to stay in Canada, why expend real, tangible political capital to explicitly lower the threshold for citizens to trigger a constitutional crisis?
That's a very fair question.
Because changing a law isn't just a talking point on a Sunday morning political panel, It is a structural, physical change to how the province operates.
Well, this raises an important question about the tension between stated policy and legislative action.
Okay, unpack that tension for me.
In politics, rhetoric is the paint, but legislation is the plumbing.
Oh, I like that. Paint and plumbing.
Right. And what the plumbing is doing here, by reducing the actual friction required to initiate a secessionist movement, seems to directly contradict the paint, which is the stated desire to remain in the country.
Definitely. It feels totally contradictory.
To understand why this matters, you have to look at how signature thresholds actually function in a democracy.
Right, because that friction is usually there for a very good reason, isn't it?
Absolutely.
Usually constitutional questions are intentionally designed to be hard to trigger. You don't want to rewrite the foundational laws of your society every other Tuesday.
Precisely. High signature thresholds act as a necessary buffer. They require massive amounts of organization, funding, and, broad popular consensus to achieve.
To keep things stable.
Right? They prevent reactionary or hyper-vocal fringe movements from hijacking the legislative agenda. If you need, say, 20% of the population to sign a physical piece of paper...
You need a massive mainstream movement.
Exactly. By lowering that threshold with Bill 54, the government has mechanically greased the wheels of secession.
Wow.
It requires less money, less time, and less consensus to force the government's hand.
Which fundamentally empowers the very base she's trying to appease.
Yes. And this is exactly why political opponents view this mechanical change as undeniable proof that Smith is enabling the separatist movement, regardless of what her official press releases say.
Because the actions speak louder than the press releases.
From their perspective, the mechanics override the rhetoric. If you actively lower the drawbridge to the castle,
right,
it really doesn't matter if you stand in the courtyard and announce on a megaphone that you want the castle closed.
Yeah, you still lower the drawbridge.
You change the physical reality of the defense.
And the people outside the castle are definitely going to notice.
Well, they always do.
Which is crucial here, because you can't quietly change the foundational laws of a province. When you lower a drawbridge like that, the people who hold the historic rights to the land beneath the castle are going to react.
Yes. And that reaction is intense.
It really is. You cannot alter the rules of a province's relationship with its country via Bill 54 and this October 19 ballot without triggering massive alarms from other foundational groups. Actions of this magnitude have severe immediate reactions.
The blowback in constitutional politics is rarely proportional. It is almost always exponential.
Exponential, that's a great word for it. And the sources show that happening in real time. The opposition to Smith's strategy is intense, and it's coming from multiple very different angles.
Comes from everywhere.
First, you have the traditional political rivalry, which you kind of expect. The documents note that opposition leader Naheed Nenshi and the NDP are aggressively accusing Smith of stoking separatism purely for political gain. They are essentially saying, you are playing with fire just to keep your base warm, and you're going to burn the entire house down.
Which, to be fair, is the standard operating procedure for a political opposition.
Totally.
Their job is to call out what they perceive as cynical political calculation. It's the expected, back and forth of the legislature.
Exactly. That's the standard playbook. But then the source material introduces a reaction that operates on a completely different, much heavier level.
And a lot heavier.
The Assembly of Treaty Chiefs voted to ask the RCMP, which, for the listener, is the National Police Force, to formally investigate Smith and the UCP regarding this referendum.
Yeah.
And the sources emphasize that this vote was unanimous.
And that unanimity is the detail that should really make everyone pause.
Why is that so significant?
Getting a diverse group of distinct indigenous nations to vote unanimously on a political intervention is incredibly rare.
It doesn't happen often.
No. It tells you that they do not view this as a standard policy disagreement. They view it as an existential threat that requires absolute consensus.
Right. And the accusations they are leveling aren't about tax rates or healthcare funding or typical provincial issues.
Not at all.
The treaty chiefs are accusing the provincial government of ignoring Canada's sovereignty, of violating historic treaties, and here's where it gets really interesting, committing potential criminal treason.
Yeah, that word right there.
Right. Smith's immediate response to this was to condemn the treason allegations as, quote, disgraceful. But I want to pause on that word. Treason.
It's a heavy word.
It is an incredibly heavy criminal term. We hear mismanagement or corruption in Canadian politics, but rarely treason involving the national police. So how do we get from a provincial political strategy, lowering signature thresholds and running a ballot, to the heavy weight of historic Indigenous treaties and criminal investigations?
Well, if we connect this to the bigger picture, to understand that escalation, you have to look at how Canada is actually legally constructed.
Okay, lay it out for us.
It is not just a simple binary relationship between a federal government in Ottawa and a provincial government in Alberta.
Like Ottawa versus the province. It's more than that.
Exactly. There is a third, profoundly deep dimension, which is the Indigenous treaties. These are historic, legally binding, nation-to-nation agreements.
And they predate the modern political structures of the provinces in many cases, don't they?
They do. They are foundational to the sovereignty of the land itself. The treaties, like Treaties 6, 7, and 8 in the region we are discussing, they were negotiated directly between sovereign Indigenous nations and the Crown.
The Crown, as in representing Canada.
Yes. They were not negotiated with a provincial government, and they certainly weren't negotiated with a hypothetical, newly separated nation of Alberta.
Okay, I see. So the province is essentially a middle layer that didn't even sign the original contract.
Exactly. So when a provincial government starts playing with the mechanics of separation, unilaterally trying to sever the territory from Canada, they are effectively trying to sever the direct legal line between the Indigenous nations and the Crown.
Even if the Premier claims it is just a negotiation tactic to scare Ottawa.
Yes, because the Indigenous leaders are looking at the mechanics. By altering the sovereign makeup of the territory, the province is unilaterally messing with the jurisdiction of those treaties.
I see. Because if Alberta suddenly isn't part of Canada, the treaties with Canada are essentially thrown into chaos.
Bingo. From the perspective of the Assembly of Treaty Chiefs, a provincial premier trying to use separation as a political lever is a direct, illegal threat to their historical rights and legal frameworks.
They just don't have the authority.
The province simply does not have the constitutional authority to drag Indigenous lands out of Canada. And that is why the language instantly escalates from bad provincial policy to criminal treason.
Wow.
They are viewing this through the lens of foundational nation-to-nation sovereignty, not through the lens of provincial polling numbers or UCP-based management.
That reframes the entire conflict. It is not just the UCP fighting the NDP over a ballot initiative. It is a clash of entirely different legal realities.
Exactly.
The province thinks it's playing a political game with Ottawa, and the treaty chiefs are saying, you are fundamentally violating the highest laws of the land.
And this is the inherent danger of brinkmanship politics. When you use the threat of separation as a political lever, you don't just pull on the federal government.
You pull on everything.
You are pulling on every single structural thread connected to that land. And as the source shows, the Indigenous leaders are effectively saying, you do not have the jurisdiction or the authority to pull our thread.
Which perfectly explains why they went straight to the RCMP instead of just, filing a civil lawsuit or putting out a political press release.
Right. They bypass the political arena entirely.
They aren't trying to win a news cycle. They are calling the province's bluff by escalating the issue to the highest criminal authority. They are basically saying, if you want to pull the structural levers of leaving a country, we will treat this as an illegal, criminal disruption of our sovereign treaties.
Precisely. It is a legal checkmate attempt. And returning to Premier Smith's reaction, calling the allegations disgraceful, you can really see the friction of a strategy losing its containment.
She lost control of the narrative.
She is desperately attempting to keep this entire exercise boxed within the boundaries of a provincial political maneuver. She wants it to be seen as just a tough message-sending exercise to Ottawa.
But the treaties make that impossible.
Exactly. The reaction from the treaty chiefs proves that once you put the actual mechanics of separation on a ballot, you completely lose control of how that action is interpreted and countered by other sovereign entities.
It is the ultimate unintended consequence. Or, honestly, maybe it's just the completely inevitable consequence of trying to do a high-wire act without a net, like we talked about at the start.
Yeah, the wind definitely changed.
You try to balance appeasing a frustrated separatist base by building the actual mechanics of leaving while officially stating to the general public that you want to stay. And suddenly you are staring down a unanimous call from historic treaty holders for a police investigation into treason.
It brilliantly highlights the absolute limit of political strategy.
How so?
Well, a skilled politician can control their daily talking points, right? And if they have a legislative majority, they can control the plumbing, like passing Bill 54.
Right.
But they absolutely cannot control how history, constitutional law, and parallel sovereign frameworks will react when they start messing with the foundation of the House.
Okay, so synthesizing all of this for you, the listener, as you navigate the daily barrage of headlines on this issue, what is the core takeaway from this incredibly dense, highly concentrated source material?
It's a lot to process.
It is. I think what we are looking at is a real-time masterclass in the severe realities of brinkmanship politics.
Yes, absolutely.
We're watching a provincial government attempt to utilize the actual legal mechanics of separation. The October 19 ballot, the lowered petition thresholds of Bill 54 as a kind of structural threat. And they are doing this while officially claiming a goal of national unity.
It is the ultimate test of whether a government can control a fire after they have intentionally poured gasoline on the floor just to prove they own a fire extinguisher.
That's exactly it. That's a perfect way to phrase it. And the ensuing reactions that are outlined in these sources show exactly why that approach is so volatile.
The blowback is immense.
Right, because the strategy hasn't just resulted in standard, run-of-the-mill political pushback from rivals like the NDP. It has triggered profound historic shockwaves.
Shockwaves that they might not be able to put back in the bottle.
So what does this all mean? Well, it has collided directly with the Assembly of Treaty Chiefs, elevating the conflict from a provincial policy dispute to accusations of criminal treason and violations of nation-to-nation sovereignty. It clearly shows you that attempting to appease a specific political base by playing with foundational legal threats isn't just a game of political chess. You are actively messing with the board itself, and the other players won't stand for it.
And I think that leaves us with a critical, much broader question to consider. Something for you to mull over that echoes far beyond just this specific document or this specific province.
What's that?
If a regional government successfully normalizes using the actual legal mechanics of leaving a country as a permanent, ongoing negotiating tactic to get what it wants, does the concept of sovereignty lose its actual meaning?
Wow.
Or does this simply become the new chaotic normal for how regions will interact with their national governments going forward. It's a fascinating and frankly slightly terrifying structural shift to watch unfold.